At the helm of the next session is Patrick Deloy, CEO of ComConsult, a seasoned expert in e-commerce and IT. ComConsult is an AI-driven e-commerce consulting agency specializing in multi-country e-commerce and omni-channel strategies. In this session, Patrick will touch on how AI can help with localization for e-commerce and share insights on leveraging AI to tailor offerings for diverse markets. Let's jump right in with Patrick Deloy.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. In the next couple of minutes, I would like to talk a little bit more about the possibility of leveraging AI and AI agents for scalable product data localization. So within this presentation, I would like to explore together with you how we can use AI and AI agents to revolutionize product data localization, especially for e-commerce merchants. So you will learn how to achieve scalability, speed, accuracy, and cost effectiveness while adapting to local consumer expectations. Let's dive right in. A little bit about me. My name is Patrick Deloy. I'm the CEO of ComConsult. I have more than 15 years in fact, close to 20 years of IT and e-commerce experience across all markets in Asia. I'm based in Hong Kong, originally from Europe, but my focus has always been on developing and deploying multi-country e-commerce and omni-channel solutions in the APAC region and globally. In fact, previously, I've founded my own e-commerce tech company. I grew it from 0 to about 350 employees in just a short span of about 5 years. Our business was then acquired by Dentsu, a very large advertisement agency with about 65,000 people globally. I've at that time taken on the responsibility of leading Dentsu's technology, commerce, and customer experience portfolio across Asia Pacific. And I've basically done this until about 1.5 years ago. We started together with a colleague, we started an agency called ComConsult that's especially focused on helping brands face really the unprecedented speed and change that is brought about by AI and Gen AI. So we believe organizations have to adapt very quickly, otherwise they fall behind very quickly and may go out of business also very, very quickly. Let's talk a little bit about localization in e-commerce. Probably most of you know this, but I would like to reiterate really the importance, right? So first of all, Asia, the whole of Asia, but if you look at all the markets from north to south, Japan, Korea, the Chinese market, Southeast Asia, etc., there's a huge diversity, obviously, of language, of cultural expectations, of legal requirements, etc. So it's probably the most diverse landscape in the world. And then obviously you have local consumer preferences as well. And this is pretty much the same everywhere, right? If I'm in a specific country, I have a certain mother tongue, I grew up in this country, this is where I live day to day, then typically I want any merchant that I interact with, any business that I interact with, also align with these local expectations, the localization, right? So almost every customer has a preference to deal with merchants, with businesses in their local language, in their native language, and adapt it to local best practices and customs. So if we look at the typical key elements of a digital presence, and especially an e-commerce side, a D2C offering, then if we talk about localization, it really includes everything from language to image to payment options to checkout process, currencies, legal requirements, among many other factors, right? It also includes a lot of local nuances that are often intangible or hard to define. So it's very comprehensive, really. And I can't, emphasize enough how important this localization really is for e-commerce merchants, because we've seen it all the time, especially when I personally worked with a lot of international companies from Europe, from the US, helped them to localize to the Asian markets and made a huge difference as well on things like consumer purchases, for example. 75% of consumers are more likely to make a purchase if the website is in their native language. Conversion rates. Websites with local content, local best practices can increase conversion rates by up to 70%. That's huge, right? Almost double the conversion rate. The satisfaction is much higher of local customers with websites and offerings that are localized. There's a much higher likelihood to buy as well. 50% of customers, almost 50%, say having a presence in their local market is a significant factor in choosing which brands to shop from. It will overall, very positively impact the sales. Obviously, if you look at higher conversion rates, higher likelihood to buy as well. The e-commerce stores that localize the content saw an estimated 71% increase in sales for the target market, and increases loyalty as well, right? Because I feel that brand, that merchant, that retailer is really taking me serious. So the possibility for me to be a loyal customer is significantly higher as well. So it's very, very important, right? Getting it right, however, is not always that easy. And there are a lot of challenges in evaluating the localization quality as well. Because again, on a most basic level, you could say, okay, we just translate the content from the site and use, translation engines obviously have become quite good. And also many of them have become semi-automized. So this is not saying this is, not relevant. Obviously, this is the first step, and this is probably one of the most important steps. But it's really just one of the steps, right? Because it doesn't guarantee a full adaptation really to localization practices. And if you look at the possibility of basically evaluating any localization and how much it really adapts to local customer preferences, then you often run into issues if you try to do it in a semi-manual process, right? So if you have, for example, human reviewers reviewing the output of, a localization, maybe a semi-automatic initial localization. So you would run into issues with speed, for example. Human review can be time consuming, right? So it can delay content deployment. Accuracy can be often a problem because human reviewers, they have some biases as well, right? And they might not fully align with the original branding. Cost can be a huge factor. Obviously, humans need to be paid, should be paid as well, according to what they deliver. So yes, the content grows, and we're talking a lot about content at scale nowadays. This can be become pretty expensive as well. Availability across all channels can be an issue, especially if there's a focus on kind of just one channel, maybe just the D2C presence, when in fact a lot of that product information may be also present across other channels, maybe in a dedicated mobile app, maybe on digital terminals, etc. Consistency can often be an issue, especially if you have different human reviewers that again have their own ideas about what localization should mean and what best practices are. And lastly, sometimes there can be even legal challenges, right? Because every market has their legal requirements as well. And again, not all human reviewers may be fully aware as well of these legal requirements and what that means in terms of localization practices. So there's a definite use case as well where we believe AI and AI agents in particular can play a very positive role, right? To actually help to scale up the review, the automated review, really, the AI agentic review of localized content at scale. It can improve the speed and accuracy of a product that is reviewed. It can lower, obviously, significantly the costs if we compare pure human reviews with AI agents supported and aided review. And it's also typically easier to really then manage this content and all the localized elements across different platforms. If we talk about omni-channel, we talk about not just one single touch point, not just this one single website maybe, but we talk about different channels and platforms where we're able to create some consistency with this approach. So how will we start? So the first step is really, and this, I think this is something that's already really, really interesting, especially if you haven't, let's say, dabbled so much yet with AI agents. It really starts with building a team. Very much the same as you would do in real life as well with, humans, where you build teams as well. And each of the team members would have their own specialization. They would have their own knowledge. They would focus on something that they're good at. And we're seeing the same approach, and we recommend the same approach for an AI agent crew. Because it's much easier to actually have these AI agents specialize really on what they're supposed to do, rather than trying to build this one single model, this one single agent that basically tries to do everything to the same degree, to the same level of professionalism, to the same level of knowledge, right? So, but you would still want to have somewhat of a team structure, because having processes as well is very helpful, especially if there's someone who is maybe built out into a more generalist position, someone who is able to bring everything together, to orchestrate, to manage everything, right? So really a leader, a manager. And then the specialized positions as well that basically work towards that leader. Again, very much like in a normal team, right? So the most basic team that we have built there with regards to especially the review, the quality review, localization content is basically this five-person team here. Obviously, it can be extended as well into further positions, but this is really what we see as the most basic unit, basically our project management team, crew, whatever you want to call it, to process and validate localization content. So it starts with the localization team leader, right? So the role of the localization team leader is that of an orchestrator and a workflow manager with the team. And the responsibilities are especially around managing workflow, collecting feedback, finalizing content, and orchestrating the overall team. Then you have the brand guardian expert, so someone who is really the brand tone specialist who ensures the brand consistency with guidelines, the tones, the messaging, and validating updates. The SEO expert, who is a search and metadata optimizer. So that would check for SEO for metadata, keywords, readability, suggesting improvements, validating updates with regards especially to findability. And then there's the market experts. So this is a position that is really focused on the localization of the cultural adaptation. So some of these nuances as well that we talked about before, some of which may be actually somewhat intangible. So the responsibilities of that in that agent are especially focused on evaluating the market fit, flagging language and contextual mismatches, and validating updates. And lastly, there's a copywriter whose role is really to refine the final content, especially the content that is provided by the other three agents, and really work on the final rewrite, right? Giving it the last, really cuts and polishes really to the final content. So integrating the expert feedback, ensuring the consistency as well across all content that's delivered, ensuring readability, and creating obviously engagement then with the final content. So this is basically the crew that works together within this process. So now, what does it look like in practice, right? So on a very high level, the workflow works like this, right? So there's some content that's being ingested. So that could be product pages or other information. It is then assessed by the different agents. These agents will provide the input. They would rewrite maybe some of the content, alter some of the content, generate a market ready version. And the final step is obviously the validation. And this is really the step where then, again, an expert or user, someone who is really familiar with the local market requirements comes in and really just does a final glance. The idea is really obviously that it should get to a stage where there is not a lot of need for this review, especially an in-depth review, because the content has already been made, so good that not many changes will be necessary. So just to dive into this just a little bit deeper, right? So it starts with the ingestion and orchestration. So first position that activates is really the team leader AI that receives, for example, let's take a product description. Let's take, a product detail page, a product description. The team leader then distributes this description to all the relevant AI agents under his command. The first three agents to activate are Brand Guardian AI, the SEO Expert AI, and the Market Expert AI. So the leader assigns a description to these AI agents for the evaluation of this content. So the Brand Guardian AI then reviews, all that content towards brand consistency and storytelling, and it provides feedbacks and corrections, and pushes this content then back to the team leader AI. Similarly, for the SEO expert AI, that would evaluate the SEO performance, the metadata, make recommendations as well, and again provide all that feedback back to the team leader AI. And the market expert AI, right, who, as we said before as well, is maybe checking for some of the deeper nuances as well, some of the local cultural fit, cultural expectations, etc. Everything within the language as well, the overall layout, contextual mismatches as well, which can become very relevant if you think about something like local humor or something, right, which might work in some market and not in others, etc. And sends this back to the team leader as well. So again, all this has gone back to the team leader. The team leader is then responsible to collect all that feedback and send it to the copyright AI, right? So again, the team leader is really the orchestration engine here in between, right? So distributing tasks, getting everything back together again, and moving it to the copyright AI. So, but in a cohesive format as well, that the copyright AI doesn't have to put these pieces together, but can really focus then on creating something, polishing something that has already been reviewed. So there's a really unified and consistent final, product description. And then the copyright AI really integrates, some of the suggestions that have come from the different agents, but it delivers then the outcome is, should be an optimized, high quality final version of content, and this again is final refinements on the language, brand consistency, etc., just to make sure everything fits well together, right? So this is really the last step. It goes back then to the team leader AI, and the team leader AI basically has a review of just the final content is provided, making sure none of the pieces are missing, right? Again, this is the role of orchestration and bringing it all together. And yeah, and then basically the expert just sees if based on the AIs, the team leader AI knowledge, there's any further input needed. It also just double checks the final copy with the other AI expert, again, the other AI agents. Again, if there's any further feedback, then it might go back to the copyright and go back to the orchestration agent. Otherwise, that's all good. And then we get really to the final step, and the final step is really where the human review and validation would still come in. So the human expert, after the team leader AI and the AI agents will review the content, and it really can go one of two ways, right? So obviously the best use case, the best case will be that the content is approved, the final version can be published. However, if corrections are needed, it returns to the copyright AI, who would again, activate the team leader AI. And then, the key to that is also that not everything has to be reviewed, but only maybe minor portions, right? So if the feedback from the human is like, okay, I like the brand consistency, I like the SEO messaging, or SEO adaptations, etc. They're all, as far as I can see, best practice. However, here on the contextual description, maybe this can be a little bit misleading in that localized language. Please rewrite that a little bit to make it a little bit more clear. Then obviously that specific AI agent would become active. So yeah, and that's really the process, right? So the main point is really building this team, utilizing then a platform as well. A couple of platforms right now that actually allow to create these workflows somewhat easily and with a lot of power as well. One of the services or platforms that we would like to use is 8N. There are a couple of others as well. Probably a lot of you have heard about Zapier that has at its start or in the connection of data sources and extended into AI agents as well. And there are a couple of others as well, but we believe 8N is actually one of the most powerful services out there to create these agent teams and workflows. And with that in mind, it's really easy then to envision as well how this can scale and automate into a much broader scope, right? So if you're an e-commerce merchant, if you have tens of thousands of products maybe, then you want to make sure this process is really as automated, as possible. And so it's easy to scale it to thousands of products and websites, with the same AI agent crew. Maybe it, can be modified as well and adapted if, use it on different verticals as well or different scenarios. All this, really means that there's an automated as much as possible quality review as well. And it also helps with really the centralization of content, right? Because something that we also consider very much best practice is to make sure that this content and, this content validation is not just used for one single channel, but it's really used across, or within a single source of truth, ideally, which in technical terms would typically be, for example, content management system, an order management system, or product information management system to centralize all that content and distribute it across all channels and touch points. The real world impact and business benefits are huge, be it, 10x or more, obviously, compared to, a human review of localization elements, huge cost reduction as well, of at least 50%, if not more, depending on how much of the, human review is still needed. Especially consistency is also very strong, right? Because you get rid of all the biases, and there's a very clear, review process as well of agents that are very, very objective, obviously, right? Don't have the same biases as humans. So yeah, this is something we see as very, very critical to create, fast and scalable processes as well for the qualitative review of localized content. Again, multiple tools are available to create these workflows, and it requires obviously a little bit of time to implement and define these agents, to implement the workflow, to test this, etc. But, again, something that previously took, at least weeks or months to implement can now be done in days, if not even hours, right? So obviously this is something that we would be very happy to help you with as well if you're interested. So feel free to contact us for further information, any strategic advice, implementation support to leverage these AI agents and workflows for your e-commerce localization needs. As you can see here in the top right corner, ComConsult Pro. Feel free to reach out to us or to me. I can also be found on LinkedIn. And thank you very much for staying on for this.
Thank you, Patrick, for sharing how AI can assist with localization in e-commerce. Let's move on to the next speaker.